Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're checking out the new Moto X Pure Edition today, and the folks from Motorola sent this to the show for us to take a look at. A really nice new flagship phone from these folks. The screens have been getting larger as they've been working their way through these product cycles, so we're now up to a 5.7-inch Quad HD display, IPS now, no longer AMOLED that the last year's edition had. Now what I'm going to do in this review is kind of step through a few of the things that I find most interesting about this phone, and if there are other things you want me to look at later, please leave them in the comments below, and we'll do some follow-up videos too. In particular, what's really neat about this phone isn't actually any part of its hardware, it's how you buy it. So it costs $399 unlocked, so it's not a carrier subsidy. You're not going to have to pay a monthly fee if you don't want to. $399 buys you the phone with 16 gigabytes of storage and some of the basic case offerings here. So what you see here is pretty much what you would get for $399, and a pretty good deal, especially because it works here in the United States on every carrier we have available here. So Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. Now, if you're overseas in Europe or Asia or any other continent where phones just work no matter which carrier you have, here in the US, all of our carriers tend to use different technologies, and this one works with all of them. So I just took my SIM card out of my iPhone, popped it in here, and I've been using this now for the last couple of days and quite pleased with it. So really nice there. A nicely performing phone also. They upped the processor from last year to a Snapdragon 808 from an 801. It's got a hexa-core CPU now, an Adreno 600 megahertz GPU, and a whole bunch of other stuff too. Now what's interesting though is that the game performance on this is about the same as last year's model, primarily because it's now driving a larger display with a higher resolution. So we went from 1080p to Quad HD, and that of course is going to require more processing power, which means we end up about the same. They did up the RAM from 2 gigabytes to 3 gigabytes, so again keeping up with most of what we're seeing on the flagship phones. You can get it with 16 gigabytes of internal storage. That's what you get for $399. 32 and 64 gig versions are also available, and you'll see in a minute you can pop an SD card in also to augment that storage. 3,000 milliamp hour battery, that's up from 2,300 milliamp hours last year, and actually the battery life is pretty good on this. Now they promised all-day battery life, and I tried that over the last 2 days and got all-day battery life out of it. So this morning, for example, I took it to work with me, and I pretty much died around 8 p.m. or so. And I was using the phone quite a bit, because that's usually when you tend to drain the battery the fastest, is when you first get the phone and you're playing with everything. So I was doing a lot with it today, trying out a bunch of different apps, doing some video and some photographs and everything else, and the battery did hold up. They do give you a turbocharger in the box to very quickly charge the battery, so I was able to go, when I tested it yesterday, from 33% to full in about 45 minutes or so. The SIM card goes in on the top here, but on the bottom is where you put your SD card if you want to extend the storage. So it's kind of a neat function here, so you can get your storage in here without having to take the back of the phone off, which I thought was an interesting way to get everything in there. Of course, though, if you want to swap out memory cards, you're going to have to get off your network for a minute, so there's a little bit more work involved with getting the memory card out of there, but I did think that was kind of a neat feature to have the SD card there on the bottom. It doesn't look like the edition that I have here supports more than one SIM card. So I know some devices do. It looks like there's actually room to support another SIM card here, but in this case it doesn't appear that this version of the phone supports that. It works with the nano SIM, so if you have an iPhone you can easily switch back and forth just by popping that SIM card out. What I'm most impressed about on here is the camera. So you see the camera on the back here. They've got a nice flash here, one of those multicolor flashes. Looks really good in low light. The flash actually looks pretty good, on par with a lot of digital still cameras that I've played with, and the image quality and clarity is pretty remarkable. It's a 21 megapixel sensor. You can see some photos that I took here out in my office. We have a local farm that's growing sunflowers on our property. Some really amazing photos, very good detail that we were able to get out of here. Really decent image quality. The video quality is equally good. Shoots 1080p at 60 frames per second, but you also get 4K also. And just look at this clarity on here with this bee on the flower. It's just pretty amazing. And there's also like a software HDR mode or something that goes on there, because you can see I had kind of a backlit sunflower here. Really, really nice camera on this device. I think probably among the best smartphone cameras I've seen, at least up until now. Of course, this always changes. It's kind of a constant war right now between all these manufacturers to try to get the best possible image quality out of their phones. So we're seeing a very quick upping of the ante across the board there. So that's a 21 megapixel camera on the back. And on the front, you have a selfie camera with a flash on here too, 5 megapixels, nice wide angle to it, really crisp clarity out of the selfie camera too. So if you're doing one of these, maybe you'll see a celebrity or something. Nobody takes autographs anymore, they just do selfies, so you'll be well equipped for that. They also have some gestures you can do, so if you flick your wrist twice, it will launch the camera automatically even if the phone is locked. So you have some little motions you can do to launch the camera if you want to do that. A flick of the wrist will then switch it over to the selfie mode also, so you can really get the camera open without having to push anything. You can just do a quick motion with your wrist here and get that camera up and running. So when we're testing Android game performance, I always like to look at the Reicast Dreamcast emulator because this taxes both the CPU as well as the graphics hardware, and in this case we can turn the sound up too. You can hear how loud it gets. So it really does sound pretty good for playing games also on it. But as you can see here, we've got a really nice frame rate here, close to pretty much 60 frames per second as we're running through one of these scenes. It's actually usually rendered by Dreamcast hardware, but here, of course, we're emulating it on the Android hardware. So it does seem to hold up very well here, what you would expect out of a flagship phone for something like this. And a lot of the current Android games will probably run just fine on here, given the fact that we've got 3 gigs of RAM and certainly the performance to be able to do this in emulation when we're not even running native Android software. What's interesting though, when you get on paper and look at its 3D Mark benchmark results here, I got a score of 19,657, which is great for what you would expect out of a flagship phone, certainly up there with all of the best ones out there, but it's about the same score that we saw last year, and I think partly because this display is requiring more resources to drive. So you've got more resolution here, so that's going to take more processing power to get the image to run as fast on a screen with greater resolution. So that is probably why we're not seeing a huge performance boost over last year, even though we've got a faster CPU and GPU. But as you can see here, it's also holding steady against the LG G4, another competing flagship phone that's on the market. So I think, for gaming, this is going to be just fine. Really nice sound out of here, actually. These two openings here are where the speakers are. Nice stereo separation between the two sides. Really decent loud speakers that sound pretty good too. I think partly because they're front facing and you do have some degree of perceivable stereo separation there, which I thought was pretty nice there too. Now this is a Motorola phone, so it has a lot of the same features that we've seen on other Moto X devices over the last year or two, including the ability to summon its lock screen here just by waving your hand in front of it. So it's always looking for motion here with its 2 little motion sensors at the bottom. If it sees motion, it'll pull up the clock here. If there are notifications, you can look at those on here also without having to unlock the phone. You can configure kind of what it does. So if you want to prevent things like emails or text messages or other private things from showing up without having to first type in a passcode, you can do that. So there are some ways to limit what that screen can do. It also is always listening, and you can set a magic phrase up here so I can ask it this question. This is my magic phrase here. Hello, computer. Tell me what the weather is going to be like in New York City tomorrow. And it will then pass from that Motorola app over to Google to get me the answer to that question. And then also part of the Motorola feature set is something called Assist, and that will allow the phone to behave certain ways depending on the time of day. For example, if I'm sleeping between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., I wish I could sleep between those hours, it would be able to perhaps keep the phone quiet and only allow certain people to come in. It'll also keep the screen blank, so even if I get notifications, I won't see them unless, again, it's a priority person. Maybe I could set a family member or something to be able to break through that. It'll also look at places that you go to. So for example, I could have it so that if I walked into a library, it would immediately silence the phone automatically, so I wouldn't have to remember to do that. So there are always places where you don't want your phone going off because everyone will stare at you. That's one way to prevent that from happening automatically. You just walk in and it will automatically turn everything off if you so choose. There's also activities too, so it knows things like driving or in a meeting or something like that. So if I'm driving, I can have the device just read the text messages to me as they come in versus having to go reach for the phone and try to figure out what's going on with it. So pretty neat little features that Motorola has added onto this. But what I like about this though, and this is really true of every recent Moto phone, is that this is a stock Android installation, so you're not going to get all these wacky skins that they place over Android or weird interface designs. This is all pure Google. So they call it the Pure Edition for a couple of reasons. One is the fact that you are getting pure Google, and also you can choose whichever carrier you want to run on it. But this is Android 5.1, and you get everything that Google would intend you to see without any extra fluff or anything else added on there, which I really do like about this quite a bit. So that is the Moto X Pure Edition. I am quite pleased with this phone, especially because of its price point. for the features. The camera's exceptional. The performance is certainly on par with other flagship phones. But what's really nice is the fact that for $400, you can own the phone, no monthly fee, no contract commitment, and use it on any carrier anywhere in the world for the most part. I think that's an exceptional value, especially now as the carriers are getting away from the subsidy and working in monthly installment plans and all this other stuff. You can really own a flagship phone here that performs every bit as good as other more expensive flagship phones, some of which may cost twice as much, yet you can own it and not have to pay any kind of leasing fee, essentially, that the carriers might want to try to impose on you. Lots of neat options for configuring the colors and everything else. You can really customize it quite nicely, but again, a really nice value, very solidly built phone, nice Gorilla Glass on here, nice battery life, and I think overall holds up against any flagship phone that I've looked at over the last year or so, and I think you'll be quite happy with it. We are getting the Moto 360 watch in very shortly, and I'm going to do a little different thing on the channel. I'm going to spend a week using nothing but this phone and that Moto 360 watch, so we'll see how this iPhone guy does with the Android platform over the course of a week. So I'll be using this phone along with the Moto 360, and I'd love to get some ideas from you all what I should cover throughout that week. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it just yet. I'm not sure if I want to do like a reality TV show kind of thing, but I might take some footage during the course of my week of things that I'm encountering that I like and don't like, and post it here. So stay tuned for that. Love to get some ideas from you. Also, if there are things that I did not cover in this review that you want to see, please do leave them in the comments below, and I will do a follow-up video. This is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.